The diner was busy, as usual, with the sounds of clinking plates, sizzling grills, and low murmurings from customers filling the air. It was late afternoon, the kind of time when the lunch crowd starts to thin, and the dinner rush hasn't quite hit yet. Tasha Green, a 28-year-old waitress, moved between tables with the kind of grace that comes from years of experience. She had worked at Café Royale for almost 3 years, and she knew the rhythm of the place like the back of her hand. The tips were decent, and the regulars were friendly, though most of the time, it felt like she was invisible. But today was different. Today, something would happen that would change everything. Tasha was clearing a table when the bell above the door jingled, signaling a new arrival. She glanced up and froze. Standing in the doorway was a young man, looking lost. He was tall, with messy brown hair and a slightly nervous expression. At first, Tasha thought he was a regular customer, but there was something about him that seemed off. He wasn't dressed like the usual patrons. He wore a simple black jacket, jeans, and sneakers, but something about him screamed that he didn't quite belong here. Then, she saw it. The small, discreet Secret Service agent standing just outside the door, keeping a close eye on him. The man had to be important. But who was he? Tasha's heart skipped a beat when it clicked. This was Barron Trump, the youngest son of former President Donald Trump. She'd seen his photos on the news before, but this was real life. The thought of helping him made her nervous, but she also felt a strange sense of duty. He looked like he needed help, and Tasha, ever the kind soul, couldn't just ignore him. Taking a deep breath, she made her way over to him. "Hey there," she greeted with a warm smile. "Can I help you find a seat?" Barron looked up at her, his expression still uncertain. Yeah, I'm just not really sure where to go," he said, his voice a little too soft for someone used to being in the spotlight. Tasha smiled again, this time more reassuringly. "No worries. You can sit right here." She gestured toward an empty booth near the back. "It's quieter if you'd prefer some peace and quiet." He nodded gratefully and followed her to the booth, where he slid into the seat. Tasha took out her notepad. "What can I get you to drink?" she asked, ready to take his order. As she stood there waiting for his reply, she couldn't help but notice the tension in his eyes. It was obvious he wasn't comfortable, probably feeling the weight of his last name in public. "Just water, please," he said, his voice still a bit hesitant. "Sure thing," Tasha replied, jotting it down. "I'll be right back with your drink." Before she could turn to leave, Barron looked up at her again. "Thank you. I didn't expect to be recognized." Tasha smiled gently. "You're welcome. It happens to the best of us, but it's no problem. Just here to help." As she walked away, she caught the glance of a few curious onlookers. The room was still buzzing, but the whispering began almost immediately. Word spread fast. Barron Trump was at Café Royale. Tasha quickly returned with his water, setting it down gently in front of him. As she did, she noticed his phone buzzing. He glanced at it briefly and sighed. Tasha didn't want to invade his privacy, but she could tell something was wrong. He rubbed his forehead, clearly overwhelmed, and for a brief moment, she saw the exhaustion in his eyes. She wondered what it must be like, living under the microscope of the world, never having a moment of peace. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft. Barron looked up at her, a small, almost relieved smile crossing his face. "Yeah, it's just a lot, you know? Being in public is exhausting." "I can imagine," Tasha said sympathetically. "But hey, at least you're here for some peace and quiet." Barron nodded. "I appreciate that. I really do." Tasha smiled, feeling a connection with him in that moment. It was rare to meet someone who understood the pressures of being under constant scrutiny. In that brief exchange, he wasn't a political figure or someone famous. He was just a young man in need of some time away from the world. But little did Tasha know, this simple act of kindness would come with consequences. Later that night, Tasha finished her shift and was getting ready to head home when her phone buzzed with a notification. She frowned, glancing at it. A news headline flashed across her screen. "Black waitress helps Barron Trump at local diner, sparks controversy." Her heart skipped a beat. Before she could process it, the phone rang again. This time it was her manager. "Tasha, we need to talk. Now." Confused, she rushed back to the diner the next morning. only to find herself sitting across from her boss, who looked stern. "I'm sorry, Tasha, but I'm going to have to let you go. We've been getting a lot of backlash from the customers." Tasha's stomach dropped. Backlash? For helping him? Her boss, Tom, nodded. "You don't understand. Politics have no place here. You've caused a lot of unwanted attention. It's just not a good look." Tasha couldn't believe it. She had done nothing wrong. All she had done was offer kindness to a person who clearly needed it. And now, she was paying the price. Her eyes burned with frustration. "I did the right thing. I helped someone who needed help." Tom sighed. "I understand, but it's not about what's right. It's about what's best for the business." Tasha's hands shook as she gathered her things and left the diner for the last time, the weight of the decision sinking in. She couldn't believe she was being punished for her kindness. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? As Tasha stepped out into the cold morning, the world felt much smaller, and yet, somehow, she felt more determined than ever. Tasha Green had always been the kind of person who felt like she had to prove herself. Born and raised in a tough neighborhood on the outskirts of Washington, D.C., she had seen and experienced enough hardship to last a lifetime. Her mother had died when she was just a little girl, leaving her with her grandmother, Miriam, a strong, no-nonsense woman who had raised Tasha and her younger brother, Jamal. Miriam had worked 2 jobs as a seamstress and had always made sure her grandchildren had food on the table, even if it meant cutting corners or going without herself. Growing up in a neighborhood where opportunities were scarce, Tasha learned early on that hard work and perseverance were the only ways out. She had been determined to do better than the generations before her, to make something of herself. She had good grades in school and a hunger for knowledge, but she knew that without money or connections, she would need to rely on sheer willpower to make her dreams come true. Her brother Jamal was the apple of her eye. He was 7 years younger than her, and though he had his own struggles, Tasha always did her best to shield him from the harsh realities of their environment. Jamal looked up to her like a second mother, and she couldn't bear the thought of him turning out like so many of the others in their neighborhood who fell into gangs or drugs. But despite the challenges, Tasha had big dreams. She wanted to own a business someday, to be her own boss. For now, though, she was stuck in the cycle of waitressing, working long hours, barely making ends meet, and doing everything she could to make sure Jamal stayed on the right path. She had always told herself that it was just temporary, that one day she would get out of this life. But every month seemed to feel the same. The bills piled up, the rent was always late, and opportunities always seemed just out of reach. Tasha's job at Café Royale had been a stepping stone. She wasn't happy working there, but it paid the bills and allowed her to stay close to the heart of the city, where she could eventually network and make connections. And, as tired as she was of her routine, there was something about the diner that felt familiar. It was the type of place where the regulars knew each other's names, where you could count on your coworkers to back you up. The small, steady sense of community gave her comfort when the weight of her responsibilities felt too much to bear. But as much as she loved her grandmother and brother, Tasha knew she couldn't stay in this place forever. She dreamed of opening her own cafe one day, somewhere she could make a difference, not just in her life, but in the lives of others. She imagined a place where people could sit and talk, away from the pressures of the world, and where she could serve good food made with love and care. It was a dream she kept close to her heart, one that she held onto tightly, even when things seemed impossible. As Tasha worked at Café Royale, she often wondered what life would be like if things were different. If she had more opportunities, if she wasn't always just getting by. There were moments, especially late at night when the diner emptied out, that she would daydream about what could be. She imagined a life where she didn't have to hustle every day, a life where she didn't have to apologize for being tired or stretched thin. But those were just thoughts, fleeting and distant, like stars in the sky that seemed out of reach no matter how hard she tried. In the meantime, Tasha focused on what she could control, making sure Jamal had everything he needed to succeed. He was smart and had a bright future ahead of him. She was determined not to let him get caught up in the same cycle that had entrapped so many others in their neighborhood. She wanted him to go to college, to get out of D.C., and to make something of himself. For that, She sacrificed her own personal desires. For that, she pushed herself every single day. But there were days when the weight of it all felt unbearable. Tasha would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was doing enough, if her dreams of a better life would ever come true. She often wondered what would happen if she just let go of her responsibilities for one night. What if she didn't worry so much about paying bills or taking care of Jamal? What if she could just have one day to herself, one moment where she didn't have to think about everything? But reality was always just a breath away, and she would snap back to it every time. Her dreams felt like just that, dreams. The harder she worked, the more obstacles seemed to rise in front of her. It was as if the world was constantly reminding her that things weren't going to get any easier. At Café Royale, Tasha tried her best to maintain a positive attitude, even when the challenges seemed insurmountable. She would chat with the regulars, make them laugh, and keep her head down when things got tough. But every night, when the shift ended, she would feel the familiar weight of exhaustion settle in. It was a cycle that felt like it would never end. And yet, in the back of her mind, she couldn't shake the thought that one day, everything might change. That one moment, one chance, might come along and alter the course of her life forever. She didn't know when that would happen, but she knew it was out there, waiting for her to find it. And that moment came sooner than she could ever have imagined. The day after Tasha had helped Barron Trump, the diner felt different. It was as if the entire world had suddenly shifted its focus to Café Royale. Her phone buzzed nonstop with notifications from friends, family, and even people she didn't know. The news of Barron's visit had gone viral, but not for the reasons she'd hoped. The backlash had already begun. Tasha walked into the diner early that morning, still exhausted from the night before. She had barely slept, her mind replaying the events of yesterday. Helping Barron Trump wasn't something she had planned. It was just a kind gesture, an instinct to help someone who seemed out of place and overwhelmed. But now, the simple act of kindness had led her into a storm of controversy. When she walked in, the usual hum of the diner was louder than normal. The moment she stepped through the door, she could feel the tension in the air. The staff was busy, moving about the space with a sense of urgency, but no one made eye contact with her. Even Tom, the manager, who usually greeted her with a half-smile, barely acknowledged her presence. "Morning," Tasha said quietly as she set her purse down on the counter, trying to make her way to the back. Tom looked up, his face tight. "We need to talk," he said, his tone colder than usual. Tasha's stomach sank. She had been dreading this moment. She had an idea of what was coming, but she hoped, deep down, that she was wrong. She followed Tom to his office in the back of the diner. The small, cluttered room felt claustrophobic today, like the walls were closing in on her. Tom motioned for her to sit down. "I got a call from the owner this morning," he began, rubbing his hands together nervously. "Apparently, there's been a lot of negative feedback after Barron Trump was here yesterday. People are upset." Tasha's eyebrows furrowed in confusion. "Upset? For helping someone?" she asked, her voice rising with disbelief. Tom sighed, clearly uncomfortable. "It's not just about that. People are saying that it's bad for business. You've stirred up some unwanted attention. We've got some regulars threatening to boycott. The owner's not happy with the publicity, and frankly, neither am I." Tasha felt her chest tighten. "So, you're blaming me for being kind? For doing my job?" Tom glanced down, not meeting her eyes. "It's not about kindness, Tasha. It's about politics. People are upset that you were seen helping Barron Trump. Whether you like it or not, politics have no place in this diner. The owner doesn't want to get caught up in any of that." Tasha felt her heart race. It was clear what was happening. She was being punished for something that wasn't her fault, something that wasn't even about her. But it didn't matter. Café Royale was a small business, and they couldn't afford to alienate any customers, especially the ones who held strong political views. "So, what does that mean for me?" she asked, barely able to hold her voice steady. Tom paused for a moment before speaking again. "I'm sorry, Tasha, but I think it's best if you leave. We're going to have to let you go." Tasha's jaw dropped. "What? No, you can't be serious." He nodded slowly, his expression apologetic but firm. "I am. It's not personal. It's just business." Her mind was spinning. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. How had everything gone so wrong so fast? A simple act of kindness had turned into her being fired, by no fault of her own. "I don't understand," Tasha said, her voice shaking. "I was just doing my job. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for him to come in." Tom's voice softened a bit, but the finality in his words remained. "I know, Tasha, but the damage is done. People are talking, and I can't ignore it. You're a great worker, but this is bigger than both of us." Tasha stood up slowly, feeling like the ground was slipping from under her. "So that's it? I'm just gone?" Tom nodded, his eyes full of regret. "I'm really sorry, Tasha. I wish there was something I could do, but there's not." Tasha's stomach churned as she made her way out of the office. She felt like a failure. She had always been told that good people would rise above, that kindness would be rewarded, but this felt like a slap in the face. How had one simple act of decency led to her losing her job? The moment Tasha stepped out of the diner, the weight of what had just happened hit her all at once. She stood on the sidewalk, feeling the cool breeze against her face as she processed the shock. She had worked so hard to get to where she was, just a regular waitress trying to make ends meet, and now, because of a moment of kindness, she was out of a job. She pulled out her phone, hoping for some support from her family or friends, but as she opened her notifications, her stomach dropped further. The headlines were everywhere. Waitress fired for helping Barron Trump at local diner. Public outrage after Waitress shows kindness to Trump family. Café Royale under fire after employees' controversial actions. The comments below the articles were even worse. People were angry, calling her everything from a liberal sympathizer to a traitor. It felt like she was under attack by people she didn't even know. Tasha couldn't believe the vitriol being directed at her for something as simple as offering a drink to a man who needed help. She thought about Barron. What had his experience been like in all of this? Was he even aware of the storm that had been unleashed because of his visit? Or had he just left the diner, like any other customer, blissfully unaware of the fallout? Tasha's anger and frustration began to bubble to the surface. Why was everyone so quick to judge her for helping someone in need? Why were people so consumed with their own political battles that they couldn't see a simple act of humanity? But Tasha wasn't one to back down. If anything, this moment fueled a fire inside her. She wouldn't let this be the end. Café Royale might have kicked her out, but this wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. She didn't know what her next move would be, but she would figure it out. She would rise above this. She had no other choice. And maybe, just maybe, this was the spark she needed to chase the dream that had been tucked away in the back of her mind for so long. Tasha hadn't expected it, but there she was, standing on the street outside Café Royale, staring at the closed door that had been her workplace for over a year. Her heart was still racing, the sting of the firing fresh in her chest. She didn't know where to go, or what to do. The anger inside her had slowly given way to a deep sense of confusion and hurt. How could a simple act of kindness cause all this? How had everything spiraled so quickly? But even as she stood there, the weight of the moment pressing in on her, something unexpected happened. She got a call. The phone buzzed in her pocket, and Tasha almost ignored it, not wanting to deal with anything else. But when she saw the name on the screen, her pulse quickened. It was Carla, her old college professor, the one who had always encouraged her to chase her dreams of owning a business. She had been a mentor to Tasha throughout her time at university, pushing her to think beyond her circumstances, to not let the world's limitations define her. Tasha hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Tasha, is everything okay?" Carla's voice was warm, but there was an edge of concern to it. Tasha took a deep breath. "Actually, no. Everything's not okay. I just got fired." There was a pause on the other end. "What happened? You were doing so well there." Tasha explained, trying to keep her voice steady as she described the situation. She told Carla everything. How she'd helped Barron Trump, and how it had all spiraled out of control, how she had been fired because of the backlash. When she finished, Carla was silent for a moment. Then she said something that made Tasha's heart race. "Listen, Tasha, I know this feels like the end of the road, but I think this could actually be the beginning of something huge for you. You've got the fire in you. You're not just a waitress. You've got something more inside of you. And I know that you've been dreaming about opening your own cafe, right? Tasha swallowed, her mind spinning. Of course, she had always dreamed of it. But now, after everything that had just happened, was it even possible? I've always wanted to open my own place, but I don't have the money, the resources, or— Don't worry about that for now, Carla interrupted. I've got an idea. How about we meet up? I've been working with a few investors, and I think I might be able to get you the connections you need. I can introduce you to people who could help you make your dream a reality. Tasha's breath caught in her throat. Could this be real? Was this really happening? You're serious? Tasha asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm serious, Carla replied. You've got what it takes, Tasha. I've seen it in you since day one. Let's sit down, talk this through, and see what we can do. I've got some ideas, and I think you're ready for this. The words were still sinking in as Tasha stood there, the noise of the city bustling around her. Her emotions were all over the place. On one hand, she felt like everything had crumbled beneath her feet. But on the other hand, she felt the stirring of something else, a spark of hope. Maybe this wasn't the end after all. Maybe this was the push she needed to take the leap and finally go after her dream. Tasha didn't know where this opportunity would lead, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let this moment slip by. It had taken something as jarring and unexpected as being fired to open the door to something bigger. The universe had just given her a second chance, and she wasn't going to waste it. She hung up the phone, her hands still trembling slightly, but her mind clearer than it had been in days. Café Royale had been a job. It had paid the bills, yes, but it wasn't her passion. It was a stepping stone, and now it was behind her. The real question was, what was she going to do with this new opportunity? Tasha thought about the cafe she had always dreamed of, a place with a cozy atmosphere, good food, and an inclusive vibe where everyone felt like they belonged. A place where people could escape from the stresses of the world, just like she had always hoped for. But what if it could be more than that? What if it could be a place that sparked change, a place where people from all walks of life came together, not divided by politics or their differences, but united by a simple love of community and good food? The more she thought about it, the more the idea excited her. Carla had given her a chance. No, an invitation, to take a risk, to believe in herself. With the right people, the right investors, and a lot of hard work, Tasha could make her dream a reality. She didn't need permission. She just needed courage. Later that evening, Tasha sat at her small kitchen table, pen in hand, and began to jot down ideas. She thought about the concept for the cafe, the menu, and the community she wanted to build. She listed everything that mattered to her: family, warmth, a sense of belonging, and most of all, hope. It was as though a switch had flipped inside of her. The anger, the frustration, the hurt from being fired, it all started to fade. What mattered now was what she could do with this new chapter in her life. She could build something beautiful. She could create the life she had always dreamed of, but only if she was brave enough to take the first step. And so, Tasha Green began to plan. She had no idea what the future held, but one thing was for sure. She wasn't going to let anyone tell her what she could or couldn't do anymore. Her journey had just begun. The next few weeks were a blur for Tasha. After her conversation with Carla, she had thrown herself into the whirlwind of plans and preparations. There was no time to waste, but the emotional roller coaster she was riding didn't stop for anyone. As much as she tried to focus on the excitement of the future, the reality of what had happened kept creeping in. Her social media was still flooded with messages from strangers, many of them criticizing her for her association with Barron Trump. But it wasn't just the strangers. Even some of her friends had reached out, expressing concern, offering advice. Some kind, others judgmental. The divide in the country had never felt more real than it did right now, and Tasha was stuck in the middle of it all. It was one comment, one simple message, that hit her hardest. It came from Rachel, her best friend from high school. Rachel had always been a voice of reason for her, and the two had weathered countless storms together. But this time, the storm felt different. Rachel's message read, I'm just so disappointed in you. I thought you were better than this. I get that you're just trying to be nice, but helping Baron Trump? You know what that represents. I don't know if I can support you after this. Tasha stared at the screen, her chest tight. The words stung far more than she had anticipated. Rachel had always been her rock, and now it felt like she was losing that anchor. The division in the world, in their friendship, seemed irreparable. Tasha couldn't believe that one act of kindness had torn through everything so violently. The next morning, Tasha was in her tiny apartment, pacing back and forth, trying to shake off the negative energy. She had spent the night replaying Rachel's message over and over in her mind, questioning her own decisions, doubting whether she had done the right thing. Could she really go through with everything, knowing the cost? Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Carla, and Tasha almost didn't pick it up. She didn't feel ready to face anyone, let alone dive back into the whirlwind of plans for the cafe. But then, she reminded herself that Carla was the one person who believed in her, who saw potential where others only saw failure. "Hello?" Tasha said quietly, her voice still shaky. "Tasha, how are you holding up?" Carla asked, her voice full of warmth. "I know things have been tough, but I've got good news." Tasha sighed, unsure if she was ready to hear more news that would add to the emotional chaos she already felt. "I'm doing okay, I guess. I've just been thinking a lot about everything." "I get it," Carla replied, her tone softening. "You're going through a lot. But listen, I think we might have a breakthrough. I've been talking to the investors, and they are really excited about the concept. I think this could be our big break." Tasha's heart raced. "Really? Really? In fact, I think we could get things moving faster than we anticipated. But, Tasha, I need you to be 100% ready for this. This isn't going to be easy. There will be challenges, people who don't agree with us, critics, the works. But you need to decide. Are you going to let this moment break you, or are you going to use it to push forward?" Tasha felt the weight of Carla's words. There it was, the challenge she had been running from, the moment of truth, the emotional climax. It wasn't just about building a cafe anymore. It was about building herself, about finding the strength to keep moving forward despite the world pushing back. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this," Tasha whispered, almost to herself. "You are strong enough," Carla replied, her voice firm but encouraging. "You've already been through so much. Think about it. What is it that's been driving you all this time? It wasn't just to serve coffee, was it? It was to create something bigger, something that matters. Don't let this moment define you in a negative way. Let it fuel you. People might tear you down, but you can rise from this. You can rise above it." Tasha took a deep breath, letting Carla's words sink in. For the first time since everything had happened, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Carla was right. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe this was just the beginning of her story. And maybe, just maybe, this was the push she needed to stand tall and prove everyone wrong. "I'm in," Tasha said, her voice steadier now. "I'm ready. I'll do whatever it takes." "That's what I like to hear," Carla said, clearly relieved. "Let's do this, Tasha. Let's make your dream come true." That afternoon, Tasha met with Carla and a few of the investors who had shown interest in her cafe idea. The meeting was intense, but it also felt like a breath of fresh air. She could see the vision coming together, the community space, the food, the atmosphere. The investors were excited, the plans were falling into place, and for the first time in weeks, Tasha felt like she was in control of her future. Later that evening, Tasha sat in the quiet of her apartment, a cup of tea in hand, reflecting on the journey so far. The emotional highs and lows were exhausting, but she knew they were part of the process. She had taken the leap, decided to rise above the negativity, and push forward with her dream. And in that moment, she realized something important. It was no longer just about the cafe. It was about who she was becoming. She was no longer just the waitress who had helped Baron Trump. She was a woman with a dream, a vision, and the strength to fight for it, no matter what. As she sat there, looking out the window at the city lights, Tasha made a promise to herself. No matter how hard things got, she would never back down. The weeks that followed Tasha's decision to move forward with her dream were filled with hard work and determination. The investors seemed genuinely interested, and she met with them regularly to discuss the plans for her cafe. The more she dove into the details of what the cafe could become, the more she felt a sense of purpose and excitement stirring inside her. It wasn't just about a business venture anymore. It was about creating something meaningful, something that could change lives. But even as the future began to look brighter, the storm of backlash she had feared was still swirling around her. The moment she had helped Barron Trump had ignited a firestorm online, and it didn't seem like it was going to die down anytime soon. Social media was flooded with comments, articles, and videos, and while there were some who supported her, the majority seemed determined to tear her down. One evening, as Tasha sat at her laptop, working through the details for the cafe, she decided to check her social media feeds. She had been avoiding them for a few days, but her curiosity got the best of her. The first thing she saw was a headline on a major news outlet's website: "Waitress fired after helping Barron Trump, the untold story of her backlash." The article was long, filled with criticism from multiple angles. Some called her unpatriotic, others labeled her ignorant for supporting the Trump family. The article even included a few personal photos of Tasha, ones taken at the cafe where she worked, showing her serving customers, smiling, unaware of the storm that was brewing around her. Tasha's stomach churned as she read through the article. Each line felt like a blow, but she forced herself to keep reading. There were interviews with customers from Café Royale, some who had expressed support for her, but most who were upset by her actions and couldn't understand why she'd helped Barron Trump in the first place. One quote from a regular customer stood out: "She seemed so kind, so friendly. I can't believe she would associate with someone like Barron Trump. I thought she was different." As she read those words, the weight of it all pressed down on her. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like she was being torn apart by people who didn't even know her. The emotional toll was becoming unbearable, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could handle the pressure. But then, something unexpected happened. Amid the sea of hate-filled comments and critical posts, Tasha saw something that gave her pause. A message from Rachel, her best friend. It read, "I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and I want to apologize. I shouldn't have been so harsh on you. I know you were just trying to be kind, and I've been caught up in all the noise. Let's talk. I miss you." Tasha stared at the screen, her heart pounding. After everything, Rachel was reaching out. She hadn't expected it. It was a small light in the darkness, a sign that not everyone had turned their back on her. She quickly typed a response: "I miss you too. Let's meet up. We need to talk." The next day, Tasha met Rachel at a small coffee shop. The awkwardness between them was palpable at first, but as they sat down and started to talk, the walls between them slowly began to come down. Rachel apologized again, explaining that she had let her emotions and the chaos of the moment cloud her judgment. Tasha listened, her heart torn between the hurt of their falling out and the relief of finding common ground again. "I'm so sorry, Tasha. I know I shouldn't have judged you so quickly. I didn't take the time to understand what you were going through," Rachel said, her voice filled with regret. "You've always been kind-hearted, and I should have known that your actions came from a good place." Tasha nodded, the anger from earlier fading. "I get it. I didn't expect to lose people I cared about because of one decision. But I'm learning, Rachel. I've learned that not everyone is going to understand my choices. But I have to do what's right for me." Rachel smiled faintly. "I respect that, Tasha, and I'll support you, no matter what." They sat in silence for a moment, both of them reflecting on the conversation, the tension slowly lifting. The storm was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, Tasha felt like she wasn't facing it alone. Rachel had come back into her life, and though things weren't perfect, Tasha felt a small sense of relief. Later that night, as Tasha sat alone in her apartment, she received another message. This time, it was from Carla. "Tasha, I just wanted to remind you that storms don't last forever. Keep your eyes on the prize. I believe in you." Tasha smiled as she read the message, knowing that Carla was right. This moment of backlash, as painful and overwhelming as it was, wouldn't last forever. It was just a test, one of many that would come her way on this journey, but she couldn't let it break her. In the weeks that followed, the storm did eventually start to die down. The media shifted their focus to the next big controversy, and the intensity of the online hate faded. But the damage had been done. Tasha had learned a painful lesson in public perception and the fragile nature of fame. The world was quick to judge, and even quicker to forget. Yet, as the storm cleared, Tasha's resolve only grew stronger. She wasn't done. The cafe was going to happen, and no amount of online outrage could stop her now. As she sat back in her chair, reflecting on everything that had happened, Tasha made a vow to herself. She was going to rise from this. The emotional toll, the public backlash, the friendships tested, none of it would define her. What would define her was the woman she was becoming. And with that, she set her sights on the future, knowing that the storm might have passed, but her journey was far from over. The aftermath of the media storm had been a blur for Tasha. While things seemed to settle down online, the tension in the real world was palpable. Her days were spent working tirelessly on plans for the cafe, trying to stay focused on her dream, but there were still moments where the weight of everything that had happened crept up on her. The calls from friends, the judgmental glances from strangers. She couldn't entirely escape it. But as the days passed, she began to find peace in small moments. She had reconciled with Rachel, and though their relationship wasn't exactly the same as it had been, it felt real again. Tasha had even managed to pull herself together enough to attend a few meetings with the investors. Things were moving forward, but she still hadn't fully shaken the anxiety that came with being in the public eye. It was one morning, as she was getting ready to meet with her investors again, when she received a message that would change everything. The message came from an unknown number, which wasn't unusual in Tasha's world anymore. She had grown used to receiving messages from people, both supportive and not, ever since her association with Barron had gone viral. Tasha, I think we need to talk. I've been following your journey, and I'd like to offer you a chance to clear the air in a way that will allow you to get the recognition you deserve. At first, Tasha thought it was spam or another angry critic, but then something about the message caught her attention. The sender identified themselves as Stephen Maxwell, a well-known journalist with a reputation for giving people a fair chance to tell their story. Tasha felt a wave of uncertainty. She had been avoiding interviews, knowing the media would twist her story into something else. But there was something different about this message. Stephen seemed genuine, and the idea of setting the record straight was tempting. She hesitated, but then thought, what do I have to lose? If she could just explain herself, her motives, her heart, maybe people would understand, or at least, she could take control of the narrative for once. She typed a response, I'd be open to speaking. Let's set something up. 2 days later, Tasha found herself sitting across from Stephen Maxwell at a small, quiet cafe in the city. The moment he walked in, she noticed something different about him. He wasn't like the other journalists she had met before. He wasn't carrying an air of superiority, nor did he look like someone who had already made up their mind about her. He smiled genuinely and sat down across from her, offering his hand. Thank you for meeting with me, Tasha, Stephen said, his voice calm and approachable. I know things have been crazy for you lately, but I promise this will be a fair chance for you to tell your story your way. Tasha shook his hand, still unsure what to expect. I'm happy to be here, but I have to warn you, this isn't the easiest thing for me. I've been torn apart by the media, and I don't know if I'm ready to face it all again. I get that, Stephen replied with a nod. I've seen what's been happening, but I think you have a lot more to offer than what people have been focusing on. You've done something brave, something kind, and I think it's important to remind people of that. Tasha felt a lump form in her throat. She wasn't used to being seen in this way, being validated. It was a relief, but also a little overwhelming. I just didn't expect everything that happened, she said softly. I helped Barron. That's all. I didn't think it would turn into this public spectacle. It wasn't about politics for me. It was about being decent, about showing kindness to someone who needed it. Stephen took a deep breath, watching her carefully. I think that's something a lot of people have missed. They've been quick to judge, to label you, without understanding your intentions. You've been painted into a corner, and it's time for you to take control of your own narrative. Tasha felt a spark of hope. So, what do you want from me? I want to hear your story. The real story. I want to know who you are, why you did what you did, and what you've learned from all this. No judgment, just truth. If you're willing to trust me, I think we can make something powerful happen here." The words hit her harder than she expected. This was the moment she had been waiting for. An opportunity to share her side of the story in a way that was fair and respectful. Tasha took a deep breath, her heart racing. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady but determined. "But I need to be honest. It hasn't been easy. I've lost people. I've had my reputation destroyed. But I'm still standing. And I'm not backing down from what I believe in." Stephen smiled. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear." The interview went smoothly. Tasha shared everything: the struggles, the pain, and the triumphs. She spoke about the judgment, the friendships that had been tested, and the unwavering desire to move forward despite it all. She explained how her kindness to Barron Trump had been misunderstood and how, in the end, it was a lesson in resilience and the importance of staying true to herself. As she finished, Tasha felt a weight lift off her shoulders. For the first time in a long while, she felt heard. A few days later, the article was published. It was nothing like the sensationalist pieces she had seen before. Stephen's writing captured her essence, her honesty, her struggles, and her resolve. The title was simple but powerful: "The Waitress Who Chose Kindness, Tasha's Journey Beyond the Backlash." The response was immediate, but this time, it was different. People were beginning to see her for who she truly was, not just the woman who had been caught up in a political firestorm. Comments poured in, many of them supportive, many of them from people who had judged her harshly at first but now recognized the truth. Rachel sent her a text, "I'm so proud of you. You're showing everyone what it really means to stand up for what's right." The message made Tasha's heart swell. She wasn't just surviving this storm, she was rising above it. And maybe, just maybe, the world was starting to see the woman she really was. Tasha sat in her small apartment, staring at the article on her phone. It had only been a few days since the piece on her had been published, and the response was overwhelming. There were messages from people all over the country, some encouraging, others still skeptical, but one thing was clear: people were listening. For the first time in a long while, she felt like her voice mattered. The article had brought a surge of interest in her cafe idea. Investors, who had initially hesitated to get involved, were now showing more interest. Some reached out personally, asking for meetings to discuss her plans. Others sent messages of encouragement, admiring her resilience. Even people who had been critical before were now expressing admiration for her courage in standing up for what she believed in. Despite the attention and the offers that started rolling in, Tasha knew the real challenge was just beginning. She had always dreamed of opening her own cafe, but now that it felt within reach, the pressure was mounting. The stakes were higher than ever. A week after the article was published, Tasha stood in a meeting room at a local business center, surrounded by the very investors who had once seemed like distant, unreachable figures. As she looked around, she could see the curiosity in their eyes, a glimmer of hope that they might finally see the potential in her idea. Stephen Maxwell, the journalist who had helped share her story, sat in the corner of the room, quietly observing the proceedings. His presence was a reminder of how far Tasha had come, how her life had shifted from being caught in a whirlwind of controversy to standing before a group of people who genuinely believed in her. "Thank you for meeting with us, Tasha," one of the investors, Mr. Hargrove, began. "We've all been following your journey, and we're impressed by your resilience. We're interested in moving forward with your project." Tasha's heart raced. It was happening. This was the moment she had been working for. But despite the excitement, doubt lingered in the back of her mind. Could she really pull this off? Was she ready to take such a big leap? "I'm excited about the opportunity," Tasha replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "But there's a lot to think about. I've had to face a lot of criticism, and I know this cafe is not just about serving coffee. It's about creating a space that means something. It's about community, inclusion, and kindness." The room went quiet, and she could see that her words were landing. They weren't just investors looking to make a profit. They were people who wanted to believe in something real. "We understand the vision," said Ms. Lewis, another investor. "We're behind you, Tasha. We see the bigger picture here. You've shown us you're not just a waitress who got caught up in a political firestorm. You're someone with a vision, a purpose. We believe in you." Tasha felt a tear welling up in her eye. She had worked so hard for this moment, and now it was here. She had been doubted by so many, but these people, these investors, they were seeing her for who she truly was. "We'll give you the funding," Mr. Hargrove continued, "but we need a commitment from you. We need you to lead this vision with the same passion you've shown so far. No more doubt, no more hesitation. This is your chance." Tasha nodded, her heart swelling with emotion. She had come so far, and now, the dream she had once only whispered to herself was becoming real. "I won't let you down," she said, her voice steady, though her hands were shaking. "I promise you, I'll give everything I have to make this cafe a success." As she left the meeting room, Tasha felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The cafe was no longer just a dream. It was a project in motion. The weight of everything she had been through seemed to lift, replaced by the weight of responsibility. But this time, it was a weight she was eager to carry. She immediately called Rachel. "I did it," she said, barely able to keep her voice from cracking. "They're on board. They're funding the cafe." "Oh my God, Tasha, that's amazing." Rachel's voice crackled with excitement on the other end of the line. "You did it. I knew you could. This is your time." "I can't believe it," Tasha whispered, feeling the enormity of the moment. "It's real now, but I'm also terrified." "Don't be," Rachel reassured her. "You're not alone. I'm with you every step of the way." The next few weeks flew by in a whirlwind of planning, meetings, and constant back and forth. Tasha had to make countless decisions about the design of the cafe, the menu, and the overall atmosphere she wanted to create. She chose a location in the heart of the city, a place where people from all walks of life could come together, enjoy a good cup of coffee, and feel like they belonged. But there were challenges, too. She had to navigate the complexities of securing permits, hiring staff, and managing the financial side of things. It was a lot, and the pressure was overwhelming at times. But Tasha never wavered. This was her chance to prove to herself and the world that she was capable of so much more than anyone had ever imagined. One evening, as Tasha was working late at the cafe site, finalizing the plans with the contractors, she received another message. This time, it was from Stephen Maxwell. "Tasha, I've been thinking about your journey a lot. There's something powerful in what you're doing. I want to help you get the word out even more. We could do a follow-up story on the opening of the cafe. It could really make a difference." Tasha smiled as she read the message. It had been months since Stephen had first reached out to her, and in that time, he had become one of the few people she trusted. He had believed in her when no one else did. "Let's do it," she typed back. "Let's show the world what this cafe is really about." The day the cafe opened was everything Tasha had dreamed of, and more. The doors swung open, and the warm aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. The place was buzzing with energy, customers flowing in and out, enjoying the welcoming atmosphere. Tasha watched from behind the counter, her heart swelling with pride. It wasn't just the cafe that she was proud of. It was the journey that had brought her here. Every obstacle, every hardship, had led her to this moment. And as she watched the first group of customers sit down at a table and chat over their coffee, she knew this was just the beginning. Opening a cafe was supposed to be a dream come true, and in many ways it was. The grand opening had been a huge success. Customers flooded in, excited to see what Tasha had built. A place that was more than just a coffee shop. It was a community hub, a place where people from different backgrounds could connect over a cup of coffee, good conversation, and a welcoming atmosphere. But as the weeks passed, Tasha soon realized that turning her dream into a successful business would be much harder than she had imagined. The early buzz was fading, and now, the real work was beginning. Tasha was sitting in her office at the back of the cafe, surrounded by invoices, menus, and customer feedback forms. The excitement of the grand opening was gone, replaced by a feeling of constant pressure. She'd spent every waking moment managing the cafe, making sure everything was running smoothly, but it wasn't enough. The cafe's foot traffic had decreased slightly after the initial excitement. Some days felt slower than she had hoped. She'd poured her heart and soul into this place, and now, she was wondering if it would be enough to sustain the business in the long term. "Hey, Tasha," came the familiar voice of Rachel, who had stopped by to visit during her lunch break. She sat down across from Tasha, who was buried in a stack of paperwork. "You look like you've been hit by a freight train." Tasha sighed, rubbing her temples. "I feel like I've been. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I didn't think it would be this hard. I thought the momentum would carry us longer." Rachel's eyes softened. "I get it, but you're doing something no one thought was possible. You're building something real, and it takes time. The first few months are always the hardest." Tasha nodded, but didn't feel reassured. "I'm trying to stay positive, but it feels like there's a million little things I didn't anticipate. We've got inventory issues, staffing problems, and the finances are tighter than I thought they'd be." Rachel leaned in, her voice dropping to a more serious tone. "Have you considered bringing in some extra help? Maybe hiring a consultant who could look at the bigger picture, marketing, finances, stuff like that? You can't do it all alone." Tasha shook her head. "I hate to admit it, but you're right. I thought I could do everything, but it's clear I can't. I just don't know who to trust with all of this." Rachel placed a hand on Tasha's shoulder. "You're not in this alone, remember? We'll figure it out. We always do." Tasha looked at Rachel, grateful for her support, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the brink of failure. She needed a solution, and fast. The next few days were a blur of meetings with her accountant, staff training sessions, and constant adjustments to the cafe's operations. Tasha found herself working late into the night, trying to keep everything afloat. Yet, despite her best efforts, the pressure was building. One evening, as she was finalizing the payroll for the week, she received an unexpected call. It was Stephen Maxwell, the journalist who had helped her tell her story months ago. "Tasha, I just wanted to check in and see how things were going with the cafe." Stephen's voice came through the phone. "I know you've been under a lot of pressure." Tasha leaned back in her chair, her exhaustion evident. "It's been tough, Stephen. I thought opening this cafe would solve everything, but it's harder than I ever imagined. I've got staff problems, the finances are tight, and we're not getting the customer traffic I was hoping for." There was a brief pause on the other end. "I get it. Starting a business is always a challenge, but you've got something people want. The cafe's concept, the community vibe, it's all solid. You just need a bit of strategy to push things forward." Tasha felt a flicker of hope. "I've been thinking about getting some help with marketing, maybe even bringing in a consultant, but I don't know where to start." Stephen's voice softened. "I think I can help. I know a few people who specialize in small business marketing and could give you a fresh perspective. I've seen your story, Tasha. What you're doing here has legs. You've just got to fine-tune things. It's not about giving up, it's about recalibrating." Tasha exhaled a deep breath. "That sounds like exactly what I need. Can you connect me with them?" "I'll make the introductions," Stephen assured her. "But one thing to keep in mind, the path you're on is the right one. It's normal for things to get hard, but you've come this far. Don't give up now." Tasha felt a renewed sense of purpose. "Thanks, Stephen. I needed to hear that." The next week, Tasha had her first meeting with Amy Daniels, a small business consultant Stephen had referred her to. Amy was a no-nonsense kind of woman, with short blonde hair and a sharp focus. She immediately dove into the numbers and the details of Tasha's business. "Okay, Tasha, let's take a look at your social media strategy first. You're not leveraging it as much as you could be. Your brand is strong. Your story, your vision, it resonates with people. You just need to get that message out there more effectively. I can help you develop a strategy that reaches your target audience." Tasha nodded, taking mental notes. "I know I've been slacking on social media. I've just been so focused on the day-to-day operations that I've neglected it." Amy smiled. "That's normal, but we can fix it. We'll also take a closer look at your menu. You've got some great options, but there might be room for improvement. We'll get the word out, and in time, the right crowd will find you." Over the following weeks, Tasha worked closely with Amy, refining the cafe's marketing strategy, enhancing the customer experience, and fine-tuning the menu. Slowly but surely, the changes began to make a difference. The cafe's social media following grew, and word of mouth started bringing in more customers. The financial pressure eased as Tasha found new ways to cut costs without compromising quality. But even with all the improvements, Tasha still couldn't shake the anxiety that lingered in the background. She knew that success wasn't guaranteed and that the cafe could still fail. The world outside was still full of uncertainties. Yet, each day, as the cafe became busier and more successful, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. As Tasha settled into her routine, there was a renewed energy in the cafe. Thanks to Amy's guidance, her marketing strategy was paying off. The customer base had grown steadily, and the cafe was starting to feel more like the community space she had always envisioned. The pressure wasn't as suffocating anymore, but it was far from gone. One afternoon, Tasha was going over inventory when her manager, Jasmine, came over with a serious look on her face. "Hey, Tasha," Jasmine began, her voice low. "We need to talk." Tasha raised an eyebrow, setting down the clipboard she had been holding. "What's going on?" "It's the kitchen staff," Jasmine said, glancing around as though making sure no one else could hear. "There's been some tension lately. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's been a lot of whispering and eye-rolling. They're frustrated with the way things are being run." Tasha's heart sank. The kitchen had always been a critical part of the cafe's operation, and she had worked hard to make sure everyone felt valued and heard. But she knew that managing people, especially when it came to a team that was constantly under pressure, wasn't easy. "I haven't heard anything specific," Tasha said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What's the issue?" Jasmine hesitated, then spoke again, this time in a more measured tone. "I think there's some dissatisfaction with the work schedules, and maybe even with the new menu changes. They feel like things have been rushed, and they don't have enough time to really settle into the changes." Tasha paused, absorbing the information. She'd been so focused on keeping up with the cafe's growth that she hadn't fully checked in with her staff. She had assumed that the positive momentum would be enough to smooth over any bumps, but now it was clear that she had missed something important. "I didn't realize it had gotten this bad," Tasha said quietly. "I'll talk to everyone, address the concerns. We'll work through this." Jasmine nodded, but there was a look of concern in her eyes. "I think it's more than just the schedule. Some of the team members have been talking about leaving. They're not sure they're happy with how things are going." Tasha's mind raced. The last thing she needed was for her staff to start quitting, especially when the cafe was finally gaining some ground. She knew she had to act fast to prevent the situation from spiraling further. That evening, Tasha decided to address the issue head-on. She called a meeting with the kitchen staff, including Carlos, the head chef, and a few others she knew had been with her from the beginning. As they gathered in the back of the cafe, Tasha stood in front of them, her hands clasped tightly together. "I've heard some of you are frustrated, and I want to know why," she began, her voice calm but firm. "I know things haven't been perfect, and I know I've been focused on other areas of the business lately. But I care about you all, and I want to make sure you feel supported." There was a long pause, and then Carlos spoke up, his voice thick with emotion. "Tasha, we get that things have changed. The cafe is growing, but it feels like we're being left behind. The new menu's been rushed, and we don't have the time or resources to execute it the way it needs to be done. The kitchen's not keeping up, and it's stressful." Tasha nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "I understand. I've been trying to balance so much at once, and I've failed to properly support you. That's my mistake, and I'm sorry." Carlos continued, his voice more insistent. "We're a team, Tasha. We want this place to succeed, but we need you to back us up. The changes need to be more thought out, and the shifts need to be fair. We're working long hours, and it's not sustainable." The other staff members chimed in, adding their own concerns, everything from inconsistent scheduling to feeling like their contributions were being overlooked. Tasha felt her heart tighten as she listened, realizing just how much she had taken for granted. "I hear you," she said, finally meeting everyone's eyes. "I promise things will change. I'll work with you to find a better balance. We'll adjust the schedule and make sure everyone has the time and resources they need to do their jobs well. And I'll take a closer look at the menu to make sure it's manageable for the kitchen." Carlos looked at her, the tension in his face easing slightly. "That's all we want, Tasha. We're with you. But you need to be with us, too." The meeting was a turning point. Tasha felt a deep sense of gratitude toward her team for their honesty and willingness to work things out. But she also knew that their trust had been shaken, and she needed to earn it back. Over the next few weeks, Tasha made several changes. She revised the staff schedules to give the kitchen more time to prepare, brought in an external consultant to help streamline the menu, and started holding regular check-ins with her staff to make sure everyone felt heard. The adjustments weren't easy, and they didn't solve everything overnight, but Tasha could feel a shift in the atmosphere. There was a renewed sense of teamwork, and the cafe's operations started to run more smoothly. Despite these improvements, though, Tasha couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something bigger was on the horizon. Running a business was never a straight path, and with every success, there were still plenty of challenges. Then, out of nowhere, Tasha got a call that would change everything. "Hello, Tasha. This is Lena West from Baker and Wright Investments. We've been following your progress, and we're interested in discussing an acquisition." Tasha froze at the mention of the word acquisition. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice tight. "We believe your cafe has a lot of potential, and we're looking to expand our portfolio. We think you'd be a good fit for our brand, and we'd like to talk about possibly acquiring your cafe." Tasha's mind raced. An acquisition? This was something she had never considered, something that could change everything she had worked for. She knew this could be an opportunity, but it also felt like a betrayal of everything she had fought for. Tasha sat in the quiet of her office, the phone still resting heavily in her hand. Lena West's words echoed in her mind. "We're looking to acquire your cafe." The idea of selling her cafe, her dream, felt surreal. It was as though the ground beneath her was shaking, and she wasn't sure whether to stand firm or fall. She leaned back in her chair, trying to focus as her thoughts spiraled. How could this have happened? Just a few months ago, she had been struggling to make ends meet, but now, her cafe had gained some momentum. The idea of selling felt like giving up, but at the same time, it offered financial security, something Tasha had always dreamed of. Her mind drifted to the moment she opened the cafe. Every decision, every hour spent scrubbing counters, every word of encouragement from Rachel, every late night spent perfecting the menu. It all led to this. This was supposed to be the start of something big. Was she really willing to give that up? But then again, the pressure was overwhelming. Even with Amy's help and the changes in place, running a cafe wasn't a small feat. The demands were constant. The payroll, the overhead, the staffing issues, it was never-ending. Maybe this was her way out. Maybe this offer was a chance to free herself from the weight of it all. Tasha took a deep breath and dialed Rachel. She needed advice, someone who could see things from a different angle. After a few rings, Rachel answered. "Hey, Tasha, you sound off. What's going on?" Rachel asked, immediately sensing the tension in her voice. "I got a call today," Tasha replied slowly, her voice betraying the uncertainty she was feeling. "Lena West from Baker and Wright Investments. They want to acquire the cafe." Rachel didn't say anything right away. There was a long pause before she spoke. "Wow, that's huge. What are you thinking?" "I don't know." Tasha felt the weight of the decision bearing down on her. "I've worked so hard for this. It feels like giving up, but it would solve so many of my problems. Financial security. No more sleepless nights wondering how I'll make payroll. I wouldn't have to constantly worry about the next setback." Rachel was quiet for a moment, processing the gravity of Tasha's words. "But is it really giving up? You're not failing, Tasha. You built something that others recognize as valuable. This could be a way for you to cash in on all the hard work you've put in. But you have to ask yourself, what do you really want?" Tasha sat in silence, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the edge of her desk. She wanted freedom, sure, but she also wanted to see her cafe thrive, to have it grow into something bigger than herself, something that would leave a legacy. "I don't know what's right," she admitted. "It just feels like I've poured my heart into this, and now, suddenly, I'm being asked to sell it." Rachel's voice softened. "I get that. But think about this. You could sell now, take the financial security, and use that to fuel whatever new projects you want to take on. You could use that freedom to pursue something else. You've shown you're capable of building something from scratch. You could do it again, maybe even bigger." Tasha thought about it. She had always dreamed of opening multiple locations, maybe even expanding to different cities. But could she handle it all again, after all the stress and setbacks? Was she ready for that kind of risk? "I've just always wanted this to be my thing," Tasha said, feeling the lump in her throat. I want to be the one who grows it, the one who makes it succeed. Rachel was quiet for a moment, then said something that stuck with Tasha. You don't have to give up your dream, Tasha. It's not about letting go. It's about finding the right path forward. If selling means you get to take the next step in your journey, then that's okay. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to let go of the weight that's holding you down. After hanging up with Rachel, Tasha spent the next few days in deep reflection. She knew she had to make a choice, but it was hard to shake the feeling that whichever path she chose, there would be sacrifices. Selling would bring immediate financial relief, but at what cost? Could she live with the regret of stepping away from the dream she had worked so hard to build? Tasha decided to meet with Lena West in person. She needed to see if the acquisition offer was as good as it sounded, or if it was just a chance for the investors to cash in on her hard work. The meeting was set for a Wednesday afternoon. Lena met Tasha at a sleek, modern office in downtown. The building itself was a far cry from the cozy, community-centered cafe that Tasha had created. As Lena ushered her into the conference room, Tasha couldn't help but feel the stark contrast between the two worlds. Lena, a well-dressed, polished woman in her early 40s, smiled warmly as Tasha sat down across from her. Thank you for coming, Tasha. I've been following your cafe for months, and I'm impressed with what you've built. It's clear you have the passion and vision. Our firm specializes in helping entrepreneurs like you take their businesses to the next level. Tasha smiled faintly but held her composure. I appreciate the offer, but I need to understand more. What exactly are you offering, and why do you think an acquisition is the best route? Lena leaned forward, her tone confident. We believe your cafe has untapped potential. We've seen how it's grown in a short amount of time, and we think we can help you expand even further, nationally, perhaps even internationally. With our resources, we can bring in the right management, streamline operations, and give you the freedom to focus on the bigger picture without the daily grind. Tasha felt a mixture of excitement and skepticism. And what would I get in return? Lena smiled. We're prepared to offer you a generous buyout. You'd walk away with a significant sum and have the opportunity to stay involved in the company at a strategic level. We want to keep the heart of your vision alive while taking it to the next stage. Tasha's heart raced. The offer was tempting. The money would solve many of her immediate problems. But would she be giving up the essence of what she loved about the cafe? Could she still shape its future if she wasn't in control? The days following her meeting with Lena were filled with a whirlwind of emotions for Tasha. The offer was too good to ignore. Financial freedom, the chance to expand without the crushing burden of daily operations, and the possibility of seeing her brand grow in ways she never imagined. Yet, as the days passed, Tasha found herself wrestling with a deeper question. Could she really let go of the dream that had defined her for so long? Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the image of her cafe. Her cafe, the small, welcoming place where she had built her life, where she had fought against the odds and poured everything into its success. The idea of handing it over to someone else felt like losing a piece of herself. But then again, the weight of running it, the constant pressure of keeping things afloat, was something she couldn't ignore either. She tried to talk herself through it, listing the pros and cons of accepting the acquisition. The financial security, the potential for greater success, and the promise of a less stressful life on one side. On the other side, the fear of losing her identity, her control over the cafe, and the part of her that was connected to every table, every customer, and every decision. One afternoon, Tasha sat in her office, looking out the window at the bustling street outside. She was trying to clear her mind when her phone buzzed, breaking her concentration. It was a message from Amy, her marketing consultant. Hey Tasha, I've been thinking a lot about your cafe and the offer from the investors. I know this is a huge decision for you, and I just wanted to remind you of something important. No matter what, your vision is what got us here. The cafe isn't just a business to you. It's a part of who you are. But remember, sometimes the next chapter requires us to evolve. Take some time to think it over, but trust your instincts. You've always known how to make the right call. Tasha read the message several times, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Amy's words hit her like a bolt of lightning. Her vision had always been the driving force, but now she had to think about what that vision could become with a new approach. Maybe it was time to let go of the idea that her vision could only work if she was the one holding the reins every step of the way. She stood up, pacing the room. What if she could still shape the future of the cafe, but without being buried under the stress of its day-to-day operations? What if this was the opportunity she needed to finally grow into something bigger? But then, another thought came to mind. What if she walked away, and the cafe lost its soul? What if she didn't recognize it anymore? Tasha sighed, sitting back down. She wasn't sure what the right answer was, but the answer wasn't going to come from overthinking. It was going to come from within. The next morning, Tasha decided to visit Carlos, the head chef, and have an honest conversation. He had been with her from the very beginning, through the highs and lows, and if anyone could provide some clarity, it was him. She found him in the kitchen, preparing for the day's rush. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling ingredients filled the air, grounding her in the moment. "Carlos, can we talk?" she asked, her voice hesitant but determined. Carlos looked up from the stove, wiping his hands on his apron. "Of course, Tasha. What's on your mind?" "I've been given an offer to sell the cafe," Tasha said, watching his reaction closely. "Baker and Wright Investments wants to acquire us. They think it has potential for a bigger future, but I'm struggling to decide if it's the right choice." Carlos's brow furrowed slightly as he took in the news. "I can imagine how tough that must be for you. This place is your heart and soul." Tasha nodded. "Exactly. But it feels like there's this big opportunity ahead. I could walk away with a comfortable future. The cafe could expand in ways I never thought possible. But I'm scared, Carlos. What if it changes too much? What if we lose everything we've built?" Carlos smiled, a reassuring and knowing smile that made Tasha's heart ease a little. "Tasha, listen. I've worked with you through a lot, and I know how much this place means to you. But it's not just about the cafe itself. It's about the people you've brought together, the community you've built. No matter what happens, that's never going to disappear. Even if someone else owns it, the love you've poured into this place will remain." Tasha felt a wave of relief wash over her. Hearing Carlos, someone who knew the cafe as well as anyone, put her mind at ease. The community, the spirit of the place. Those things would never leave, no matter who held the reins. "But what if it's different?" she asked, still uncertain. "What if the investors change everything and it doesn't feel like ours anymore?" Carlos placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've done the hard part, Tasha. You've built something incredible. You don't have to be the only one carrying the weight anymore. If the cafe is to grow, sometimes you have to trust others to help you carry that load." Tasha looked at him, a sense of clarity finally starting to settle in. "You're right. I've been so focused on keeping control that I forgot about the bigger picture. This could be a chance to make the cafe something even greater, something that can reach more people." Carlos nodded. "Exactly. And you'll always be part of it, no matter what. You've earned that." Later that day, Tasha made the decision. She called Lena and arranged another meeting, ready to discuss the terms of the acquisition. As she dialed Lena's number, she felt a mix of emotions: apprehension, excitement, and the knowledge that whatever happened next, it was time for her to evolve. The next morning, Tasha met Lena once again in the sleek, modern office. This time, she felt more certain in her decision. "I've thought a lot about your offer," Tasha began, her voice steady, "and I'm ready to move forward with the acquisition." Lena's eyes lit up with approval. "That's wonderful, Tasha. I'm so glad you've come to this decision. We'll make sure that the transition is smooth and that the heart of what you've created remains intact." Tasha smiled faintly. "I know that's important. I want to make sure the community we've built here stays at the core of what we do, no matter who's in charge." Lena nodded. "Of course. And we'll work with you to make sure your vision continues to guide us. You've done an incredible job. Now it's time to take it to the next level." As Tasha walked out of the meeting, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The decision wasn't easy, but she knew it was the right one. She wasn't abandoning her dream. She was evolving it. And with that, a new chapter of her journey was about to begin. The days after Tasha's decision felt like a blur. She'd made the choice to sell her beloved cafe, but there was still a sense of uncertainty that lingered. Even as the ink dried on the agreement with Baker and Wright Investments, a part of her heart still felt torn. She had worked tirelessly to make the cafe a success. Every late night, every heart-to-heart conversation with regulars, every bit of sweat and tears. It was hard to let go of something that had defined her for so long. But Tasha knew that change was inevitable. She had made the choice to trust the next chapter of her journey, and now it was time to step into it. 2 weeks later, the transition process was underway. The new owners were eager to get started, and Tasha was ready to hand over the reins, though a part of her couldn't help but feel like she was stepping into the unknown. She'd spent countless hours training the new management team, ensuring that they understood the essence of what made her cafe special. But no matter how much she explained, no matter how many heartfelt conversations she had with the team, she couldn't shake the feeling that things were changing in ways that were beyond her control. But as the days passed, something remarkable began to happen. Tasha realized that she wasn't losing the cafe. She was gaining something far greater. Lena West and her team understood the importance of preserving the spirit of the place. They implemented new systems to streamline operations, brought in additional staff to manage the growing demand, and even helped revamp the menu, all while keeping the heart of the cafe intact. Slowly but surely, Tasha began to see her vision come to life in ways she had never imagined. One afternoon, as Tasha walked past the front of the cafe, she paused for a moment. The familiar buzz of conversation, the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee, and the laughter of customers, everything felt the same. But it wasn't the same. The cafe was growing, expanding in ways she had only dreamed of. Tasha felt a smile tug at her lips as she looked through the windows. Amy, her marketing consultant, had been working closely with the new owners to build the cafe's brand presence. And it was working. They had launched an online ordering system that was gaining traction, and the cafe's social media presence was thriving, thanks to Amy's expertise. But it wasn't just the business that was thriving. It was the people. Tasha had poured her heart into creating a community at the cafe, and that hadn't changed. Regular customers still came in, greeted by familiar faces behind the counter. Carlos, still the head chef, had remained with the company, his love for the place evident in every dish he prepared. Even Rachel, Tasha's childhood friend, stopped by on her lunch breaks to keep the spirit of camaraderie alive. One afternoon, while Tasha was grabbing a coffee at the cafe, Lena West approached her. She had always been warm, but today there was something different in her eyes. "Tasha, I've been meaning to talk to you," Lena began. "We've been incredibly impressed with the way things have been progressing. The brand is growing, and the community is responding. But more importantly, I want to acknowledge what you've built here. Your vision, your heart, those are the things that make this cafe special." Tasha smiled, feeling a sense of pride wash over her. "It means a lot to hear that. I've always wanted this to be more than just a place to grab a coffee. I wanted it to be a place where people feel connected, where they feel like they belong." Lena nodded. "You've succeeded in that. And that's why I wanted to talk to you about something." Tasha raised an eyebrow, curious. "What's that?" "We want you to remain involved, but in a more advisory role," Lena continued. "You've got the experience, the vision, and the heart. We want you to help us steer the brand, guide the direction, and make sure we're staying true to the spirit of what you created. It's clear that you have a deep connection with the cafe and the community. We don't want to lose that." Tasha's heart swelled with emotion. She had been worried about losing her place in the cafe's future, but this offer gave her a chance to stay connected without the pressure of running day-to-day operations. She could still shape the direction of the cafe, still be a part of its journey, but without the weight of everything on her shoulders. "I'd love that," Tasha said, a genuine smile spreading across her face. "I'm grateful for everything you've done, and I think I can bring something valuable to the table." Lena grinned. "Great. We're thrilled to have you on board." Over the next few months, Tasha took on her new advisory role, finding fulfillment in helping the cafe grow while also allowing herself the time and space to focus on other passions. She started giving back to the community by organizing local events, hosting charity nights, and even collaborating with other local businesses. The cafe continued to thrive, and Tasha's heart swelled with pride as she saw her vision take flight in ways she had never anticipated. She also found time to pursue other projects she had once dreamed about, things she had put on hold because of her dedication to the cafe. Tasha had always wanted to write a book about her journey, the highs and lows of entrepreneurship, and the importance of following your heart. Now, she was finally starting to make progress on that dream, carving out time for herself and her own growth. But through it all, Tasha knew one thing for sure. The cafe would always be a part of her. She had built something beautiful, and no matter who owned it or where it went, it would always carry her spirit. One evening, after a long day of meetings and brainstorming sessions, Tasha walked into the cafe to find the place bustling with customers. She could hear the familiar hum of conversation, the clinking of coffee mugs, and the steady rhythm of the espresso machine. As she stepped inside, she was greeted by Amy, who waved from the counter. "Tasha, you're just in time. We've got a full house tonight," Amy said with a grin. "I'm so glad to see you here. How's everything going with the new projects?" Tasha smiled, feeling a sense of contentment wash over her. "It's all coming together, slowly but surely, and I couldn't have done it without you." They exchanged a few more words, but Tasha found herself pausing for a moment to take it all in. The cafe wasn't just a business. It was a living, breathing testament to everything she had worked for. It was a reflection of her journey, her struggles, and her triumphs. And as she looked around at the community she had built, Tasha knew that no matter where her journey took her next, she had found something even more valuable than success. She had found a place where her heart truly belonged. Tasha's new role as an advisor for the cafe brought her a sense of freedom she hadn't anticipated. She was still deeply connected to the heart of the business, but the daily stresses were no longer hers to bear. Instead, she had the space to think creatively, to guide the brand in new directions, and to explore other passions that had long been on the back burner. However, with newfound success and the expansion of the cafe's brand came challenges Tasha hadn't fully expected. As the cafe grew, so did the complexities of its operations. Lena West and the team were doing an excellent job with the day-to-day running, but the demands of the larger organization were beginning to weigh on everyone. The rapid growth came with its own set of difficulties, maintaining the original charm and community feel of the cafe, managing larger teams, and juggling the expectations of investors. One morning, Tasha received a call that she hadn't anticipated. It was from Carlos, the head chef. "Hey, Tasha," Carlos said, his voice tense. "We need to talk. There's something going on in the kitchen, and I don't know how to handle it." Tasha's heart skipped a beat. "What's wrong, Carlos?" "It's the new kitchen staff," Carlos explained. "They're great workers, but there's been some friction between them and the rest of the team. I'm worried it's starting to affect the food quality and the atmosphere in the kitchen. There's also been some tension over the new menu items. Some of the old crew feels like the changes are taking the cafe away from what we built together." Tasha paused for a moment. She had feared this kind of tension would arise as the cafe expanded, but hearing it firsthand made it feel all too real. The cafe was changing, and not everyone was happy about it. The last thing she wanted was for the heart of the cafe to be lost in the pursuit of growth. "I'll be there as soon as I can," Tasha said, her voice firm but caring. "We'll figure this out together." Tasha arrived at the cafe just as the lunch rush began. The usual hum of activity was now mixed with an undercurrent of tension. She could feel it in the air as she walked into the kitchen. The team was working at a rapid pace, but the smiles were few, and the usual camaraderie felt absent. Carlos greeted her at the door, looking exhausted. "Thanks for coming, Tasha. I've tried to keep it together, but it's been tough." Tasha nodded, giving him an encouraging look. "Let's sit down and talk through this." They found a quiet corner away from the kitchen chaos, and Tasha asked Carlos to fill her in on what was going on. After he explained the issues, she could see how the changes were starting to create a rift. The new staff members wanted to bring their own ideas and innovations to the table, while the old crew felt their contributions were being overshadowed. "This place isn't just about food," Tasha said thoughtfully. "It's about the energy, the heart. We can't let this tension boil over. We need to find a way to keep the family feel, but also embrace the new energy that comes with growth." Carlos sighed. "I just don't know how to balance it. The new menu items are getting good feedback, but some of the original crew are feeling left out, like they don't have a voice anymore." Tasha sat back, deep in thought. She knew that this wasn't just a kitchen problem. It was a cultural problem, one that could affect the entire business. As much as she had hoped the transition would be smooth, she realized that scaling up wasn't as simple as just adding more seats and menu items. It meant keeping the soul of the place intact while navigating the complexities of growth. "I think we need to have a team meeting," Tasha said. "We need to address these issues head-on, openly. Everyone needs to be heard." Later that afternoon, Tasha called a meeting with the entire staff, both new and old. The cafe was bustling, but Tasha insisted that everyone gather in the back room for a heart-to-heart. It was time to have the difficult conversation that had been simmering under the surface for weeks. As the team gathered around the table, Tasha stood at the front of the room, feeling the weight of the moment. She knew this could either make or break the future of the cafe. She had spent so long creating a space where people felt like family, and now it was time to make sure that family didn't fall apart. "Everyone, I know things have been a bit tense lately," Tasha began. "I've heard the concerns, and I want to make sure we're all on the same page. This cafe is built on a sense of community, and I want to keep that, no matter how much we grow. But I also know that change is hard. We're adding new ideas, new people, and new challenges to the mix. We need to make sure we're not losing sight of what made this place special." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of both the new and veteran staff members. "I want to hear from all of you. What's working? What isn't? And most importantly, how can we work together to keep this place growing, while also holding on to the heart of what we've built?" For the next hour, the room was filled with honest feedback. The newer staff members shared their excitement about the changes, the opportunities to bring new ideas to the table. The old staff members, though hesitant at first, expressed their concerns about feeling sidelined and disconnected from the decisions being made. Tasha listened intently, nodding as everyone spoke. She could see how deeply everyone cared about the cafe, even if they had different ways of showing it. The old staff wasn't resistant to change. They just wanted to feel valued and respected in the process. "We need to bridge the gap," Tasha said, after listening to everyone's input. "There's no reason why we can't blend the new with the old. We can keep the spirit of this place alive, while also evolving. From here on out, I want us to be more collaborative in how we make decisions. We'll work together on menu items, staff roles, and the vibe of the cafe. Let's keep the communication open." The room was quieter now, the tension starting to ease. The staff members nodded in agreement, visibly relieved that their concerns had been heard. As the meeting came to a close, Tasha felt a sense of pride wash over her. The conversation had been difficult, but it was necessary. The cafe wasn't just about the food or the decor. It was about the people who brought it to life. And as long as she could keep the team united, Tasha knew the cafe would continue to thrive. As she left the cafe later that day, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but Tasha was ready for the challenges. She had learned that navigating growth wasn't just about expanding the business. It was about staying true to the heart of what made it special and making sure that every member of the team felt part of the journey. Tasha had always known that challenges were inevitable, especially with the rapid growth of her cafe. The recent tensions among the staff had been a wake-up call for her. But after the heart-to-heart meeting, she felt a sense of relief and optimism. The cafe was still on track, and there was a renewed sense of camaraderie among the team. Tasha knew that her job was far from over. There was still a long road ahead, and she had to ensure that the spirit of the cafe remained intact while navigating the changing tides of the business. It wasn't long before another opportunity came knocking, a golden one, but one she hadn't seen coming. It all started with a phone call on a rainy afternoon. Tasha was sitting at her desk, sipping a cup of coffee and staring at her computer screen, when her phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number, but something about it piqued her curiosity. She picked up the phone, her finger hovering over the screen. "Hello? Tasha, this is Robert Hayes," the voice on the other end said. "I'm with the Keller Group, a national brand expansion firm. I've been following your cafe's journey, and we're very interested in talking to you about a potential partnership." Tasha sat up straight, her pulse quickening. A national brand expansion firm? This was bigger than anything she had imagined. She had heard of Keller Group. They were known for partnering with businesses that had potential to grow and make a significant impact. But Tasha wasn't sure if she was ready to take that leap. The cafe was still in its early stages of scaling, and the last thing she wanted was to lose control over something she had built from the ground up. "I appreciate you reaching out," Tasha said cautiously. "But can I ask what exactly you have in mind?" Robert didn't hesitate. "We believe your cafe has the potential to become a nationwide brand. We have a proven track record of helping local businesses expand to a national level, and we think we can take your concept to the next level. We want to work with you on a plan that will allow you to scale while maintaining the essence of what you've created. But we'll need your help to make this happen." Tasha's mind raced. A nationwide expansion was a dream, but it also came with risks. She had always been proud of how her cafe felt like a community, a warm, welcoming place where people could gather and feel at home. Could she truly preserve that if the cafe grew too large? Would it still have the same soul? "We'd like to meet with you and discuss this further," Robert continued. "How about we schedule a meeting next week? We can talk through the details and figure out if this is the right move for you." Tasha agreed to the meeting, though a small part of her felt nervous. She had spent so many years building her cafe into something meaningful, and now, an opportunity was on the table that could change everything. The following week, Tasha met with Robert and his team at the Keller Group's office. The building was sleek, modern, and filled with the quiet hum of high-powered professionals working behind closed doors. It felt worlds apart from the cozy, intimate vibe of her cafe. Robert was a sharp, polished man in his 40s with a confident smile and an air of authority. He greeted Tasha warmly and immediately got down to business. "We've done our research on your cafe, Tasha," Robert began. "We see a unique concept here. A community-driven space that's built around great food, strong relationships, and a welcoming atmosphere. We believe there's a national audience for this. We can help you scale while keeping the things that matter: quality, authenticity, and community. But we'll need your commitment and a plan to move forward." Tasha listened carefully, intrigued but cautious. "I appreciate the offer, Robert, but I'm not just looking to grow for the sake of growth. This cafe means a lot to me and to the people who come here. I need to know that, if we expand, we won't lose what makes it special." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "I completely understand. That's why we approach partnerships like yours with a tailored strategy. Our goal isn't just to increase your bottom line. It's to help you maintain the heart of your business while expanding it. We've worked with other brands to create a balance between growth and maintaining authenticity. Our team would handle the heavy lifting of logistics and expansion, but we would rely on your vision and guidance to make sure the soul of your cafe is never compromised." Tasha felt a weight lift off her chest. Robert's approach felt right. He wasn't pushing for growth at any cost. He genuinely seemed to care about preserving the essence of what she had built. "All right," Tasha said after a long pause. "I'm willing to explore this further, but I want to see a concrete plan. I need to understand exactly how this will work." "Of course," Robert said with a smile. "We'll work together to create a roadmap that aligns with your vision. Let's take the next step and start planning." The following weeks were filled with discussions, meetings, and plans. Tasha worked closely with the Keller Group team to map out a strategy for expansion. They explored various cities and locations that would align with her cafe's community-focused model. Each step was carefully considered, and Tasha made sure that the cafe's values, its welcoming atmosphere, high-quality food, and commitment to local connections, remained at the forefront. As the plan took shape, Tasha began to feel a mix of excitement and trepidation. This was a huge opportunity, but it was also a big leap. She was stepping into uncharted territory, but with the right team behind her, she felt confident that they could preserve what made her cafe so special. One day, while sitting at her desk reviewing the final drafts of the expansion proposal, Tasha received a text from Lena. It was a simple message, but it stopped Tasha in her tracks. "Just wanted to let you know, the cafe has hit its highest revenue month ever. The team is thriving, and I think we're ready for the next step. Whatever you decide, we've got your back." Tasha smiled as she read the message. She felt a swell of pride in her chest. The cafe was in good hands, and the community she had built was stronger than ever. The decision wasn't easy, but Tasha knew she was ready for it. She had spent years building this cafe, pouring her heart into it every single day. And now, the opportunity to take it to a larger scale, to share what she had created with a wider audience, was within reach. Tasha took a deep breath and hit Send on her reply. I'm in. Let's do this. Tasha sat at her desk, staring at the proposal in front of her. It had been a whirlwind of meetings, ideas, and strategies since she had committed to the expansion with the Keller Group. Now that she had signed the papers, the reality of the situation was beginning to sink in. What once felt like an exciting adventure was now a massive responsibility. She was no longer just running a local cafe. She was preparing to build a national brand. The stakes were high. Every decision from this point forward would have a ripple effect, not just on her business, but on the lives of her employees, customers, and partners. The pressure was mounting, and Tasha could feel it like a heavy weight on her shoulders. The first few weeks of the partnership with Keller Group were filled with action. Teams were assembled, and meetings were scheduled to develop a comprehensive marketing, operational, and expansion plan. It was a fast-paced environment, but Tasha couldn't help but feel the excitement of seeing her dream come to life on such a grand scale. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. During a meeting one afternoon with Robert Hayes and his team, Tasha began to see the first signs of the tension she had feared. The Keller Group was pushing hard for rapid expansion. More locations, more investment, and a faster timeline. They were laser-focused on scaling the business, but Tasha could feel her instincts pulling her in a different direction. Here's what we propose, Robert said, his voice confident. We'll open 3 new locations in the next 6 months: New York, Chicago, and Dallas. Each city has a high demand for your concept, and we're confident that with your brand recognition, we'll hit the ground running. Tasha's stomach tightened. 3 locations in 6 months? It felt like too much, too soon. She had always been careful about growth. She had worked tirelessly to create a space where quality was paramount and the atmosphere felt like home. Could they really maintain that if they expanded at this pace? I understand the potential, Robert, Tasha replied, her voice steady but with a hint of concern. But I'm worried about moving too fast. What happens to the quality if we don't have the right systems in place, or if we can't replicate the community feel in these new cities? Robert's expression softened slightly. Tasha, we've done this before. We have the infrastructure to support a fast rollout. We'll handle the logistics, the hiring, the marketing. Your job will be to ensure the brand stays consistent, and we'll support you every step of the way. But the more Tasha listened, the more she felt like she was losing control. It wasn't just about opening new locations. It was about preserving the essence of the cafe. Could the soul of her business survive such rapid expansion? The fear of losing what made the cafe special began to settle in her chest. Later that evening, Tasha sat alone in the cafe, reflecting on the meeting. The quiet hum of the cafe was comforting, a stark contrast to the chaos of the corporate world she had just stepped into. Lena had taken the night shift, and the place was calm, with only a few regulars seated at their usual spots. Tasha walked up to the counter where Lena was working, her mind racing with the decisions she had to make. I need your advice, Tasha said, her voice a mix of uncertainty and determination. Lena looked up, wiping her hands on her apron. Of course, what's going on? Tasha sat down on one of the stools, folding her hands. We're pushing ahead with the expansion, but the pace is much faster than I expected. I don't want to lose the essence of this place, Lena. I don't want to sacrifice what makes us unique just to grow quickly. Lena paused, considering Tasha's words. I get it, Tasha. This place means so much to all of us. But I think it's about balance, right? We can grow, but we don't have to compromise. It's like you said before, we don't want to become just another chain. We need to figure out a way to bring what we've built here to these new places, while staying true to the heart of it. Tasha nodded slowly. Lena was right. There had to be a way to expand without losing the cafe's spirit. But how? The thought weighed heavily on her mind. I guess I'll have to find that balance, Tasha said with a sigh. But it's not going to be easy. As the weeks passed, Tasha found herself in the midst of difficult decisions. The push for rapid growth continued, with Keller Group urging her to sign off on new locations. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that the cafe's success wasn't just about the food. It was about the experience, the relationships, and the community that had grown around it. Tasha decided to take a step back from the fast-moving plans and focus on the foundation of her business. She called a meeting with Robert and his team. I need to talk to you about the timeline, she said, her voice firm but respectful. I'm not comfortable with the pace we're moving at. I want us to slow down. Let's focus on getting the first new location right before we start looking at others. Robert didn't immediately respond, his expression unreadable. But after a few tense moments, he nodded. I see your point, Tasha, he said. We can adjust the timeline, but I want to make sure we're not losing momentum. I'm not saying we should halt everything, Tasha explained, but we need to do this in a way that feels right. Let's perfect the process with one location, ensure it's a true reflection of what we stand for, and then we can look at scaling further. There was a pause, and Robert seemed to be weighing her words carefully. Finally, he agreed. All right, we'll scale back, focus on the first location, and make sure it's done right. But we'll need to move quickly once we've perfected it. Tasha sighed in relief. She had found a middle ground. The expansion would happen, but it would be on her terms, at a pace that allowed her to ensure the essence of the cafe remained intact. As Tasha drove home that evening, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just made a pivotal decision. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in weeks, she felt a renewed sense of control. She was ready to face the challenges ahead, knowing that she didn't have to sacrifice her values to achieve success. The next few months would be filled with hard work, new challenges, and many decisions. But Tasha knew one thing for sure. She was determined to build a brand that stayed true to its roots, no matter how far it grew. Tasha had taken a big risk when she decided to slow down the expansion process. Her decision to focus on the first new location, making sure it was an authentic extension of what her cafe represented, had been met with both relief and apprehension. The Keller Group had reluctantly agreed to her revised timeline, but Tasha knew the stakes were higher than ever. Her ability to balance growth with maintaining the heart of the business was now being tested in ways she hadn't anticipated. The first few weeks after the decision felt like a whirlwind. There were constant meetings, updates, and logistics to manage for the new location in New York. Tasha had to ensure that everything from the design to the menu to the staffing reflected the soul of her cafe. It wasn't just about opening another store. It was about creating an environment that could bring people together in the same way the original cafe had. To make sure she stayed involved in the process, Tasha spent a lot of time in New York, personally overseeing the construction and design of the new space. She worked closely with the architects to ensure that the layout would evoke the same cozy, welcoming vibe that had become synonymous with her cafe. But as the project advanced, so did the challenges. The first big hurdle came when they hit a major delay with the construction schedule. The new location was supposed to open in 3 months, but unforeseen setbacks meant they were looking at a delay of at least another month. Tasha felt the pressure mounting. The Keller Group had already invested heavily in the project, and they were eager for results. Every delay meant more money spent and more uncertainty. Frustrated, Tasha found herself in a heated discussion with the construction manager. I don't care about the excuses, Tasha said, her voice edged with frustration. We need to open on time. You told me the timelines were solid, and now we're behind. I can't afford to miss another deadline. The construction manager was visibly taken aback by her forceful tone, but he quickly regained his composure. Tasha, we're doing everything we can, but these things happen. It's not just us. The entire supply chain has been impacted by shortages and delays. We'll make up time, but pushing us too hard won't solve anything. Tasha took a deep breath. She knew he was right, but the stress was beginning to get to her. She had already sacrificed so much for this new location, and the thought of pushing back the opening even further was unbearable. I just want this to be perfect, she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, there was a silence between them. The construction manager seemed to understand, and with a small nod, he said, We'll make sure it is. We won't let you down. Tasha tried to hold on to that reassurance as she walked away, but the weight of her responsibility continued to weigh heavily on her. She knew she had to manage expectations, both her own and those of the Keller Group. But no matter how hard she tried to control the situation, there were still so many variables that were out of her hands. Back in her original cafe, Tasha was greeted with a surprise when she returned for a quick check-in. Lena had reached out to her earlier, telling her there was something important to discuss. Tasha had assumed it was something to do with the staff or the day-to-day operations, but what Lena revealed made her pause. "We've been getting some complaints from the staff," Lena said, her tone serious. "It's about the pressure they're feeling with the new location and everything else. They feel like the cafe's success has created high expectations for them, and they're worried that the same will happen when we open the New York location. They're scared it'll affect the vibe of this place." Tasha's heart sank. She had always been protective of her team, making sure they felt valued and appreciated. The thought of her staff feeling stressed or unsupported was disheartening, but it also made sense. The cafe's growth meant more attention, more pressure, and, inevitably, more expectations placed on everyone involved. "I didn't realize it was that bad," Tasha said, rubbing her forehead. "What do we do, Lena?" Lena hesitated, then met her eyes. "Maybe it's time for you to really sit down with the team. Let them know that you're in this with them, that they're not just employees. They're part of the family. We need to remind them why we're doing this and what we stand for." Tasha nodded, feeling a sense of resolve settle over her. She knew Lena was right. If her team didn't feel supported and understood, they wouldn't be able to provide the kind of service that had made the cafe so special in the first place. That evening, Tasha decided to call a staff meeting, inviting everyone to join her in the cafe after hours. She wanted to address the concerns head-on and reassure them that, even though things were changing, their voices would always matter. As the staff gathered, Tasha could feel the tension in the room. She had always prided herself on being open and approachable, but the stakes had never been higher. She had to make sure everyone understood her vision and how important their roles were in making that vision a reality. "I know things have been a bit crazy lately," Tasha started, her voice steady but warm. "And I understand that the pressure is mounting. We're growing, and that comes with challenges. But I want to make one thing clear. This cafe, the heart of what we do, will always be about more than just numbers or expansion. It's about the people who come in here every day, the community we've built, and the relationships we've formed. That's what makes this place special." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each of her staff members. "You all are a part of that. Without you, none of this would be possible. And I'm not going to let the growth of this business take away from that. We're a team, and I'm in this with you. Together, we'll face whatever comes next." Tasha could see the tension start to ease in the room. The staff seemed to relax, nodding in agreement. She could feel the strength of the team in that moment, and she knew that as long as they stuck together, they could handle whatever challenges came their way. As Tasha left the cafe that night, she felt a sense of relief. The burden of leadership had never been heavier, but it also felt like a reminder of why she had started this journey in the first place. To create something real, something meaningful. The cafe wasn't just a business to her, it was a part of who she was. The next few months would be filled with more challenges, but Tasha knew she wasn't alone. She had a strong team behind her, a clear vision, and the unwavering commitment to preserve what made the cafe unique. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but Tasha was ready. The days following the staff meeting seemed quieter in the cafe, but there was an undercurrent of tension. Tasha felt as though she had reassured her team, but uncertainty still lingered in the air. The construction in New York was still delayed, the pressure from Keller Group continued to grow, and Tasha was starting to feel the weight of all the decisions she had to make. But little did she know, a new, unexpected challenge was just around the corner, one that would test not just her leadership but her very core. It all started one Friday afternoon when Tasha received a call that she never could have anticipated. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen to see an unfamiliar number. She answered, not knowing that this conversation would forever change the trajectory of her life. "Hello, is this Tasha Barnes?" the voice on the other end asked. "Yes, this is she. Who's calling?" "This is Robert Hayes from the Keller Group," the voice continued, a tone of seriousness seeping through. "We need to talk about the situation in New York." Tasha's heart dropped. She knew the delays had been a concern, but this call sounded different. Something was off. "Is there a problem?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "More than a problem, Tasha. It's a crisis. There's been a major incident involving the construction team at the New York location. I need you to get here as soon as possible. We're going to need to make some tough decisions." Tasha's mind raced. She grabbed her bag, not even bothering to hang up the phone before rushing out of the cafe. She was already thinking of all the possibilities. What could have happened? Had there been an accident on site? Or worse, had they hit a financial snag that threatened the whole project? She hopped into her car and sped to the airport, her thoughts in turmoil. As she boarded the plane, the anxiety only intensified. What kind of tough decisions was Robert talking about? Tasha tried to focus on the situation, but the fear of the unknown gnawed at her. When Tasha arrived in New York, Robert was waiting for her at the site. His face was grim, and his usual confident demeanor was replaced with something more serious. She immediately knew this was bigger than just another delay. "Robert, what happened?" Tasha asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Robert led her to the back of the site, where a group of workers were gathered, talking in hushed tones. "We've had some issues with the contractor," he explained. "Turns out, they've been cutting corners on the materials, and now there's a safety hazard. We've had to shut down the entire operation until we can sort this out." Tasha's blood ran cold. "Safety hazard? How bad is it?" "It's serious," Robert said, his eyes darkening. "We could be facing legal issues if we don't act quickly. There are also rumors that some of the workers might have been aware of the issue and didn't report it." "It's a mess, Tasha." Tasha took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had built this dream from the ground up, and now it was teetering on the edge of disaster. "So what's the plan?" Robert looked at her, his expression hard. "We need to get new contractors on the job immediately. We're going to need to eat some of the costs, but I don't see any other way around it. And we need to make sure the team knows we're handling it, or it could affect the brand's reputation." Tasha's stomach churned. This wasn't just a delay. This was a full-blown crisis, one that could cost them both time and money, and it could even ruin the reputation of the cafe before it even had a chance to establish itself in New York. "We'll do what we need to do," Tasha said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "But I want to talk to the workers first. I need to know everything, who knew what, when, and how we can fix this." The next few hours were a blur. Tasha met with the workers, some of whom seemed genuinely remorseful, while others were defensive. The confusion was palpable, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just a contractor issue. It was a breakdown in communication and accountability. Tasha sat with each of the workers, listening to their stories, trying to piece together the truth. As she spoke with them, she could see the cracks in the operation. There were too many shortcuts, too many corners cut, and too much reliance on individuals who hadn't followed the proper procedures. The workers, while remorseful, were also nervous about losing their jobs, and Tasha could feel the tension mounting. By the time she finished speaking with everyone, she was emotionally drained. But there was no time to process her feelings. She had a decision to make, and she had to make it fast. That night, Tasha sat alone in her hotel room, trying to make sense of everything. She couldn't help but think back to when she first started the cafe, when it had been small, manageable, and her responsibility alone. But now, things were so much bigger, and the decisions she made affected so many more people. Was she cut out for this? Could she truly handle the weight of it all? Her phone buzzed again, and she saw it was Lena, calling to check in. Tasha hesitated for a moment, unsure if she wanted to talk, but she knew she needed to hear a familiar voice. "Hey, Lena," Tasha said, her voice quieter than usual. "Hey, how's everything going? I saw the news about the New York location. You okay?" Lena asked, her concern evident even over the phone. "I'm fine. I think," Tasha replied, sitting on the edge of her bed. "It's a mess, Lena. We've had a major issue with the construction. It's not just a delay, it's a safety hazard. We've had to shut down the whole site." Lena let out a long breath. "Wow, that's huge. But Tasha, you've handled so much already. You've built this thing from nothing. You can handle this too." "I don't know, Lena. This feels different. It's not just a setback. This could ruin everything. The pressure is insane." Lena paused, her voice softer now. "Listen to me. You don't have to do this alone. You've got a team who believes in you. You've got me. We'll figure this out together, okay?" Tasha felt a lump form in her throat. Lena's words were like a lifeline, pulling her back from the brink. "Thanks, Lena. I needed to hear that." After a long pause, Lena added, "You've got this, Tasha. One step at a time." As Tasha hung up, She felt a renewed sense of clarity. The road ahead was daunting, but she wasn't alone in this. She had her team, her friends, and most importantly, her own resolve to rely on. The future of the cafe depended on the choices she made now, but no matter how tough it got, she would face it head-on. She was more than just a business owner. She was a leader, and it was time to lead. The days following the construction crisis in New York were a blur for Tasha. She spent long hours with Robert, the new contractors, and her team, making critical decisions about how to move forward. The magnitude of the situation weighed heavily on her, but there was no time to feel sorry for herself. She had a business to save, and every hour counted. The one thing that had become clear to her was that she had to rebuild trust, not only with the Keller Group and her investors, but also with her team. And that was no easy task. Tasha stood in the middle of the New York location, surveying the damage. The construction delays, the safety hazard. It all felt like a punch to the gut. The new contractors were working hard to fix the problems, but the reality was that they were behind schedule, and every moment of delay meant more costs, more uncertainty. "I can't believe this happened," Tasha muttered to herself, her hands on her hips as she stared at the unfinished walls and exposed wiring. Behind her, Robert approached. "I know it's tough, but we've got a plan now. The new team is working double time. We'll have it back on track in no time." Tasha turned to him, her gaze hard. "No time for soon, Robert. I need this open in 6 weeks. Can we make that happen?" Robert hesitated for a moment, clearly understanding the gravity of her request. 6 weeks is tight, but we'll do everything we can. We'll prioritize the essentials first and push through the rest after." Tasha nodded. "Good. Make it happen." As Robert walked away to oversee the new team, Tasha's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a message from Lena. "How's it going? I'm thinking of you. You've got this." Tasha smiled briefly, grateful for the support. It was one of the things that kept her grounded. But despite the reassuring words, she knew that this wasn't going to be easy. There was too much at stake. Back at the cafe in Chicago, Tasha's team was still reeling from the news of the issues in New York. Though they had been briefed on the situation, Tasha knew she had to address it directly with them. She needed them to understand that their work in Chicago was just as important, and that they all had a role to play in the success of the business. Tasha gathered the staff for another meeting in the evening, a few days after her return from New York. The cafe was quiet, the only sound coming from the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional clink of dishes in the back. The staff filed into the meeting room, their faces reflecting the uncertainty that had been hanging in the air since the news broke. "All right, everyone," Tasha began, her voice calm but firm. "I know things have been a little tense lately, and I wanted to take a moment to address everything head-on. First, I want to thank you all for the hard work you've put in, especially with everything going on. You're the heart and soul of this place, and I don't take that for granted." She paused, looking around the room. The staff were listening intently, their expressions a mix of concern and curiosity. "Now, I want to be upfront with you all. We've had a major setback with the New York expansion. There was a serious construction issue, and we're working through it. It's going to take time, but we're going to fix it, and we'll come out stronger because of it. But here's the thing. This doesn't just affect New York. It affects all of us." She walked to the front of the room, pausing to make eye contact with her team. "We're going to need everyone pulling together. The cafe in Chicago can't just coast while we deal with the issues in New York. You all have always gone above and beyond, and I need you to keep that up. We're not just growing a business here. We're building a community, and that requires all of us to be on the same page." The room was silent for a moment, then Lena, who had been working with Tasha for years, spoke up. "We're with you, Tasha. We've got your back. Just let us know what we can do to help." Tasha smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. "I appreciate that more than you know, Lena. I'm going to be in New York a lot over the next few weeks, but I'll be checking in regularly. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." The meeting ended with a renewed sense of unity. Tasha knew there was still a long road ahead, but she felt more confident that her team in Chicago was as invested in the success of the cafe as she was. A week later, Tasha was back in New York, her mind focused on the task at hand. The new contractors had managed to speed up the process, and things were slowly coming together. But there was still so much to be done. The finishing touches on the interior, the final walkthroughs, the logistics of hiring and training the new staff. It all seemed overwhelming. One evening, as she was walking through the almost finished space, she got a call from Robert. "Hey, Tasha, we're hitting another snag," he said, his voice tense. "We just got word that the kitchen equipment we ordered is delayed. It won't arrive for at least another week." Tasha let out a frustrated sigh. "I don't have another week, Robert. I need that equipment here. We can't afford another delay." "I'm on it," Robert replied. "I'll see if we can get it expedited, but we're running out of options." Tasha pinched the bridge of her nose, trying to contain her rising frustration. She had worked so hard to make this happen, but the universe seemed intent on throwing one obstacle after another in her path. She had come so far, and now this? But then she remembered her own words from the meeting back in Chicago. "We're building a community." The cafe wasn't just about her. It was about everyone involved, her team, her staff, the customers. She couldn't give up now. "I'll figure something out," Tasha said, a new sense of determination flooding her. "Thanks for the update. Just keep me posted." Later that night, as she sat alone in her hotel room, Tasha reflected on everything that had led her to this point. The road had been anything but smooth, but she had never backed down from a challenge before, and she wasn't about to start now. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Lena. "You've got this. We all believe in you." Tasha smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. She wasn't in this alone. With the support of her team and her unwavering determination, she knew she could turn things around. Tomorrow, she would face whatever came next. But tonight, she would take a moment to remember why she started this journey in the first place. The cafe wasn't just a business, it was her dream, and she would do whatever it took to make sure it survived. The sun was beginning to set over New York as Tasha walked through the nearly completed cafe site. The space that had once been filled with chaos and uncertainty now gleamed with potential. There were still some finishing touches to be made, but the vision she had worked so tirelessly for was beginning to take shape. Yet, the pressure was far from over. She had 6 days until the grand opening, and every minute counted. Tasha stood by the front window, watching as the last of the contractors worked on installing the final pieces of kitchen equipment. She hadn't allowed herself to relax for a second, knowing that any small delay could risk everything she had worked for. The staff was ready, and the marketing campaign was set to roll out. But without the equipment they needed, it wouldn't matter how prepared they were. "Robert," Tasha said as she turned toward him, "what's the status on the equipment? Are we on track?" Robert, who had been overseeing the contractors all day, wiped his brow and gave a tired but relieved look. "I've got good news, Tasha. The equipment arrived this morning, and it's all set up. The last inspection's done, and everything is working perfectly. We're ready." Tasha felt a wave of relief wash over her, but there was still so much to do. "Great, but now we have to make sure the staff is fully trained. I don't want any surprises on opening day." Robert nodded. "I've already scheduled a few mock runs with the kitchen crew tomorrow, so they'll be prepared." As Tasha walked through the space, she couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. This cafe, this dream she had worked so hard to build, was finally becoming a reality. But then her phone buzzed in her pocket, and the moment of triumph was broken by the harsh reality of what still lay ahead. "Hello?" she answered, seeing the caller ID display Lena's name. "Tasha, it's time for the final push," Lena's voice crackled through the phone. "I know it's been a rough ride, but the hard part is over. You've done all the groundwork, and now you just need to keep going. This is it. The big day is almost here." Tasha smiled softly, comforted by Lena's familiar words. "I know, Lena. I can feel it. Everything's coming together, but I'm still nervous. The pressure's been building, and I can't shake the feeling that something will go wrong." Lena chuckled on the other end. "Tasha, you've been handling setbacks like a pro. Don't let the nerves get to you now. You've got this. Think of how far you've come. This is the moment you've been waiting for." Tasha let out a slow breath. "You're right. I just need to remember why I started this." "You've built something special, Tasha. Don't let fear take it away now. We're all cheering for you," Lena said. "You've got a team that believes in you." Tasha's heart swelled with gratitude. Thanks, Lena. I needed to hear that. Before she hung up, Lena added, remember, no matter what happens, the cafe is just the beginning. It's what you've done for the community, for everyone around you, that truly matters. The next few days were a whirlwind. Tasha was practically living at the New York location, ensuring that every last detail was perfect. The staff training sessions were grueling, but necessary. She worked closely with each team member, from the kitchen crew to the front-of-house staff, making sure everyone knew their role down to the finest detail. On the evening before the grand opening, Tasha sat alone in the cafe, the calm before the storm. The walls were lined with elegant decor, the tables were polished, and the scent of fresh paint and new equipment filled the air. The space was beautiful, but it felt empty. She knew it would soon be filled with customers, but for now, it was just her and her thoughts. Tasha reflected on how far she'd come. The cafe in Chicago had started as a small, humble dream, and now, here she was, on the brink of launching a second location in one of the most competitive cities in the world. There had been moments when she thought she would break, when the pressure felt too much, when the setbacks seemed insurmountable. But she hadn't given up. She had pushed forward, step by step, and now, it was finally happening. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a text from Robert. Everything's set for tomorrow. The team's ready. We're good to go. Tasha smiled, but the anxiety was still there. Tomorrow was a huge day. The cafe would either soar or stumble, and there was no middle ground. The day of the grand opening arrived, and Tasha could feel the excitement in the air. She had barely slept the night before, her mind racing with thoughts of the day ahead. The team was on edge, and she could see the nervous energy in their eyes as they prepped for the event. She stepped into the cafe early in the morning, taking in the view one last time before the doors opened. The space was filled with the buzz of the final preparations. Robert was overseeing the kitchen, while the front-of-house staff was double-checking everything from the reservation list to the drink menu. Tasha knew that no matter how many details had been perfected, there would always be variables she couldn't control. But she had prepared as much as she could, and when the doors opened, she would face it head-on. As the clock struck 10 a.m., Tasha stood at the front of the cafe with Robert by her side. The doors were opened, and the first customers began trickling in. A mix of regulars, excited newcomers, and influencers had gathered, eager to see what all the hype was about. Tasha greeted each guest with a smile, but inside, her heart was pounding. She watched as the kitchen staff delivered their first orders, her nerves rising as the morning continued. But then, something remarkable happened. The cafe ran smoothly. There were no major hiccups. The team was on point, the kitchen was efficient, and the customers were happy. By the time the afternoon rush hit, Tasha was finally able to breathe. The cafe was buzzing with energy, and it was everything she had hoped for. The hard work, the setbacks, the late nights, it was all worth it. She was watching her dream unfold in real time, and it felt surreal. As the day wound down, Tasha took a moment to step outside. She looked up at the towering buildings of New York, feeling the weight of the city around her. It was in this moment that she realized the full scope of what she had accomplished. She wasn't just building a business. She was building a legacy. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Lena. "How's it going? I knew you'd crush it today." Tasha smiled and replied, "It's going better than I could have ever imagined. We did it." She stood there for a moment longer, soaking it all in. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel proud. The cafe was open. The dream was alive. The excitement of the grand opening had faded, but the thrill of success lingered in the air. Tasha stood at the front of the cafe in New York, observing the buzz of activity around her. The cafe had been open for just over a week now, and the positive reviews were pouring in. Every corner of the cafe was alive with customers, some enjoying their morning coffee, others digging into their meals, and many more gathering to socialize in the warm, welcoming atmosphere she had worked so hard to create. It felt surreal. After all the challenges, the setbacks, and the sleepless nights, it was finally happening. She had done it. The cafe was alive and thriving, just as she had envisioned. Later that evening, Tasha sat in her office behind the cafe, looking at her laptop screen. She was reviewing the financials and customer feedback, making sure everything was running smoothly. There were still challenges to face, but things were looking promising. The New York location was beginning to carve out its place in the competitive market, and Tasha knew that with the right strategies, the cafe could continue to grow. But the thought that consumed her the most was what came next. She had always wanted this to be more than just a business. It was a passion project, something that had the power to change lives and build a community. As the cafe became more successful, Tasha realized that it was time for her to think about the bigger picture. What did the future hold for her and for the cafe? As Tasha was deep in thought, Robert walked into her office with a cup of coffee in hand, breaking her concentration. He flashed her a grin. "How's it going, boss? You look like you're deep in thought again." Tasha smiled and took a sip of the coffee he handed her. "Just thinking about what's next. We've got a lot of momentum right now, but I want to make sure we keep it up. We've built something amazing here, and I don't want to lose sight of what brought us here in the first place." Robert nodded. "You've got a great team behind you, Tasha. You've laid the foundation. The next step is figuring out how to expand." Tasha leaned back in her chair, her fingers tapping the desk lightly. "Yeah, I've been thinking about that too. But expansion isn't just about opening new locations. It's about staying true to what we've built. We've created a place where people feel like they belong, and that's something I don't want to lose." "That's the key right there," Robert said, sitting down across from her. "The community aspect. People don't just come for the coffee or the food. They come because it's a space where they feel like they matter. We've built that connection. If we can replicate that in other cities, I think we'll be onto something really special." Tasha nodded thoughtfully. "That's the vision. I want this to be a chain that represents more than just food and drink. I want it to be a place where people can find connection, peace, and a little escape from their busy lives. But we have to keep that spirit alive, even as we grow." Robert smiled. "I think that's what makes you different, Tasha. You've always put people first. That's why this cafe works. And that's why it'll keep working." The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings, planning sessions, and brainstorming. Tasha and Robert worked on developing a long-term vision for the cafe. They discussed ways to streamline operations, expand the menu, and build a stronger online presence. But the most important thing on their minds was how to maintain the unique, community-oriented vibe that had made the cafe so successful from the start. As they looked at potential new locations for expansion, Tasha began to realize that the key to growth wasn't just about numbers and profits. It was about creating a culture that extended beyond the walls of each cafe, one that could spread to new cities and bring people together in meaningful ways. One evening, Tasha found herself sitting in the cafe, watching the hustle and bustle of the evening rush. Her staff was busy, working with confidence and purpose, and the cafe was alive with the energy of happy customers. She couldn't help but feel proud of what they had built. Just then, Lena walked in, smiling as she saw Tasha sitting alone at a corner table. Lena had flown into New York to visit and show her support for the cafe's opening success. "Hey you," Lena said, dropping her purse onto the chair across from Tasha. "I had to see it with my own eyes. I'm so proud of you." Tasha smiled warmly, grateful for her friend's support. "Thanks, Lena. It's been a crazy ride, but we're here, and it feels amazing." Lena sat down, her eyes scanning the cafe. "I can tell. You've created something really special here, and I think this is just the beginning." Tasha nodded. "I've been thinking a lot about what comes next. There's so much potential here, but I want to make sure we don't lose sight of the soul of what we've built. It's not just about opening new locations. It's about building something that lasts." "I think you're already doing that," Lena said, "and I'm here for all of it. Whatever you need, I've got your back." Tasha's heart swelled with gratitude. Lena had been there from the very beginning, through the tough times, the uncertainties, and now, through the triumphs. It meant the world to her to know she wasn't in this alone. The next few weeks flew by in a blur of meetings and preparations. Tasha continued to fine-tune the operations at the New York cafe, while also laying the groundwork for future expansion. She kept a tight grip on every aspect of the business, ensuring that it was true to her original vision. As the cafe's success continued to grow, Tasha found herself at a crossroads. She could keep pushing for more growth, more locations, more revenue. Or she could focus on what mattered most, creating a sustainable, meaningful business that made a difference in people's lives. The decision wasn't an easy one, but Tasha knew in her heart that the right path was the one that stayed true to her original mission. She wasn't in this to build just another cafe chain. She was in it to create a space where people could come together, feel seen, and find comfort in each other's company. As Tasha walked through the cafe one last time before leaving for the night, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. This was more than just a business. It was a home for her team, for her customers, and for herself. And in that moment, she knew that the journey was far from over. The future was filled with endless possibilities. But whatever came next, she was ready. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Tasha has built her dream cafe, but will the pressure of growth and expansion be her next big challenge? Will she stay true to her mission, or will the weight of success pull her in a different direction?